Thor Skywalker has released recently a video called The Problem with Jedi in the Disney era of Star Wars. And we are going to watch it and we are going to pick it apart. And there's something he says that's very important to cling to, and we're going to play it right now.
If the foundation is faulty, then everything else built upon it is going to suffer.
Now, remember that quote because we're going to come back to it at the end. It's not overtly toxic. And the reason why we're reacting to it right now is because it is very misinformed. And it's also very, very clickbaity. Like the problem with Jedi in the Disney era of Star Wars. And it's very irresponsible to make this title. And so after watching the video, there are several problems that we have with some of the points that he makes.
I mean, right out of the gate, he starts out by talking about the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, saying that, you know, there wasn't really any power creep between the two. They kept it in the same vein. and that's not true. Just to run through really quick, A New Hope, we see a mind trick. He hears a voice and he has, you know, kind of sensory. He can barely pull a lightsaber to him, but we do see telekinesis out of Vader in several places, including Force choke, and then Luke and Leia talk to you. He reaches out to her through the Force, and then after that we have Return of the Jedi, where we see Force lightning for the first time. Mm-hmm. Compare that to the prequels and the Clone Wars, there is so much more. I mean, I'm answering questions all the time on how come they didn't just use force speed all the time.
We go back to the prequels, and we are using Clone Wars in this analysis because he cites Clone Wars in his video as well. But we have augmented physical abilities, which was brand new. The force speed. We had deflecting blaster bolts, which was new in the vein that they were deflecting them back and reflecting them. And we had Palpatine mind injecting himself into Yoda's mind, and sort of like interrupting his trials and inserting himself in Yoda's mind. And then we have several Sith and several Darksiders and several Jedi, you know, pulling starships and pushing starships. There's stuff before season 7 that was totally new,
including the Mortis arc. God damn it.
Yeah. Like where, if we want to talk about power creep, this is just like new info. And of course we had no problem with it. Right. But if we're going from like the originals to the prequels and consequently, or subsequently the Clone Wars, Mortis, gods representing aspects of the Force, is hella new. And just to kind of like touch on his point about, you know, Qui-Gon Jinn saying that he wish it were so that Jedi couldn't be killed. At no point during the sequels does it feel like Rey can't be killed. In fact,
yeah, she dies. She is killed. So the complaint that, you know, feels like they are like becoming superheroes or something like that is just wild and, like you said, irresponsible. But again, this isn't, you know, to put any hate on Thor Skywalker or anything. And like, this isn't like overtly bad. There's just some glaring holes in it. And he also makes a great point about Grey Jedi and why they don't work in canon. And he brings a great point up, though, that your strength in the light side happens to be in regards to your attunement to the light side. It's surrendering yourself to the Force. But then he goes on and says that that's not how it works later, even though he just said it is.
So then he talks about superheroes and does this analogy with Spider-Man, of course. With great power comes great responsibility, and talks about like power being thrust upon Rey and how that's a Disney problem. Why isn't it a Disney problem?
It's literally what happened to Luke. Luke didn't know that the Force existed. He didn't know he was related to anyone special. He had this whole thing thrown upon him all at once, and he took it with stride. He destroyed the Death Star and beat, you know, his father, one of the most powerful Sith Lords and greatest Jedi and greatest duelist of all time. after a little training. So it's not a problem specifically with the sequels, and you can also compare that to Rey, who did know that the Force existed. It's just an interesting complaint.
Yeah, and part of this point he mentions, or Thor Skywalker mentions, that they shut their eyes and let the Force in, and she's able to defeat a Sith or an equivalent of a Sith in the dark side. And I have to say this over and over again: she did not defeat Kylo. Kylo lost. That's an important distinction to make because he was wounded, he was emotionally unstable. And, they touch on that in The Last Jedi when Snoke says, "You are unbalanced, bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber." So all she did was close her eyes, and she remembered the lesson that she was taught by Maz Kanata, the same lesson that was taught by Obi-Wan to Luke, and the same lesson that was taught to Anakin from Qui-Gon. Feel the light, it's always been there, right? And so she taps into that lesson. And she finally trusts herself and lets go. But it's at this point that Kylo has already run the toll on his dark side, stamina. And he gets pushed back. But it has nothing to do with her being able to defeat him, because in all the rest of their fights in the sequels, he wins.
It's almost like if I walked up to Anakin as a burnt person McNugget, hanging out by the lava, if I walked over and kicked him in and said, "I beat Anakin Skywalker," did I beat him? No, he was wildly injured. If I walked up to Maul after he was cut in half, if I walk up to Kylo Ren after he's been shot and has all this stuff going, like, again, and I know we're covering the same ground here, but like, I think it's important that people understand that Rey overcoming Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens is akin to her Death Star moment. That was the parallel. That's the same scene.
Absolutely. And then he says, "We don't see any training out of Rey until the third film." Again, we iterate, she trained with Luke. And this is about her lifting rocks, right? And we all know the Force isn't about lifting rocks, but essentially that's what it is, in these moments. It doesn't matter how long she trained with Luke or how little she trained with Luke. She trained with Luke to concentrate, to feel the Force around her. And that's exactly what she did. She was not tapping into any new powers in that moment. She closed her eyes, connected with the Force, compelled it to do something she wanted it to do, and she was undistracted. And there's a point I want to make here where he talks about, Rey doing something that we haven't seen Jedi Masters do. And this is like one of those fallacies where, just because you don't see something, it doesn't mean it's not possible. Because, so like an immediate example I can think of is if you see a Jedi Master and you don't see them do something throughout an entire movie, and then in the next movie, a Jedi Knight does something, does that mean that the Jedi Master is incapable of doing it? No.
Absolutely not.
We just don't see them do it. And so that's the entirety of the counterpoint. Like, Rey doesn't do anything that a Jedi Master would not be able to do. And we see Obi-Wan do it in the Kenobi show.
Also, just because we saw Luke lifting a few boulders while doing a one-handed handstand with Yoda on his foot, doesn't mean Luke couldn't lift them either. I mean, Luke's problem when he's lifting the X-Wing out is belief. Right, that's his problem. It's not that it's too heavy. He even says it's too big, it's too heavy. No, that's not the problem. So if Rey doesn't have the same problem with learning, like it's about learning the lesson. And if you've learned the lesson, you've learned the lesson.
And that's a good distinction to make between Luke and Rey. Luke was very much skeptical, did not believe it, whereas Rey was all like, yeah, please train me, like teach me all of these things. Like I'm an open book. There's another point that he makes in the video saying, like, we see Vader pulling ships in Kenobi. So why doesn't he pull the Millennium Falcon when they're escaping from Echo Base? Why doesn't he send Luke's X-Wing careening into the Death Star? And this is like an expectations versus reality type of thing, or like a non sequitur. It's
I hate these type of complaints because they're so they're so stupid. To be honest, in the prequels, we saw Palpatine ripping things off in the Senate, right?
Mhm.
Why didn't he do that? How come Vader could just pick him up and throw him over the edge? Why couldn't he fight? And why isn't that a problem? Why is this one the problem?
Inserting into that, we saw Palpatine also jump from pod to pod in the Senate. If Vader threw him down, why doesn't he jump off of the center of the shaft and jump back up and go, ha, 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 ha?
I'd love to see parkour Palpatine springboarding back up. That'd be amazing.
Exactly.
But like in Empire Strikes Back, Luke says, "I'll never join you." He lets himself fall, and Vader just goes, ugh. In one of the most defeated. I love like his expression, but like, why didn't Vader just grab him with the Force and pull him back up? We literally just saw Vader inside ripping big giant metal things off the wall and slapping Luke around with them. We know he could do it. We saw it in that same film. Why didn't he do it? It's because he didn't do it. Like those complaints are so dumb to me because it's
expectation versus reality. We see people do things all the time, and they don't do it. Now, does that mean they don't know how the Force works? No, that just means the story didn't let them do it, you know? Force speed. I mean, the in-universe response is that, you know, it's a very taxing skill to use, but a lot of their problems could be solved with using force speed. A lot of their chases could end really early if they force pulled their you know, the escapee, because that's just like you're kind of thrusting your own expectation upon the story instead of consuming the story as it's being told. That's just the recipe for disappointment. People do.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the expectation, he said that he was hoping that what was going to happen is that Kylo Ren was going to awaken something in the Force that Vader had been trying to for years, and that would have been a cooler story. And well, that may have been a cool story, although that conflicts with how the Force worked. Well, it may have been a cool story. It's not what happened. And just because it's not what happened doesn't mean that what happened is bad or wrong or off. He even had to go to say that Rey had never even trained for a day,
which is wrong. Even if you're going off of The Last Jedi, she trained for at least a day, but she trained for more, but at least at minimum a day. And she doesn't do anything out of the ordinary outside of the scope of that training. Concentration, lifting rocks. The moment she does something extraordinary is after she's trained for a year with Leia, training for that specific thing, mind you, for Be With Me. And that is the most extraordinary thing she does. The dyad stuff, the dyad is just new lore. Update your lexicon. They can pass objects between each other. That means you write that down and be like, that's the dyad. That's not how the Force works. It's impossible. That's just how it works.
Also, even that is not even unseen before. I mean, that particular portion of the ability is unseen, but like we had mentioned before, Palpatine was able to use Dooku's bond to Yoda as master and apprentice in order to enter Yoda's trial and fight him inside of his mind, inside of the Force. It's not exactly clear, but when people have these strong connections, we know that certain things can happen. Certain boundaries are broken, and especially with the inclusion of the world between worlds, I believe all that stuff is just being passed through another.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where as soon as you say it's impossible with the Force, you've already lost, because the Force is in and of itself a Deus Ex Machina. It's a plot device, and whatever the story needs from the Force will provide, depending on whoever's writing at the moment,
But I mean, and you say that from the writing standpoint, but also like quite literally in story, We watched Rogue One. We saw the rebels pinned down. One person steps out, an inch out, gets shot in the chest. Done. Sheridan Way slowly walks. The Force was guiding him and helping him and protecting him. That's part of the movie. That's part of how it works. This whole video just seemed to have a fundamental misunderstanding of how things worked. Of not only had a decent understanding of the Force, of how the Force works, but not how the role that it plays in everyone's story or how everyone interacted with it. And because of that, I think that clip, we showed in the very beginning is very poignant for this video.
If the foundation is faulty, then everything else built upon it is going to suffer.
And the foundation of this video was most definitely faulty, and everything else suffered. Now, we're trying to be concise with all of our counter arguments here, and we haven't even touched upon the before Disney Legends continuity with black hole manipulation, fabric tearing force storms, the lightning from Vitiate having solved the immortality problem to begin with.
Every Sith solved immortality.
Every Sith has solved it before Plagueis. And just like force pushing mountains and flinging planets, like the power creep existed in the Legends. Now I get that. I get that is Legends and that is not directly Lucasfilm and the movies, but I'm just saying that power creep, including Starkiller, was there. But we arrest our case. In any case, that'll do it for this video. This is in no way, shape, or form trying to start drama or hate or throw shade at Thor Skywalker. We just wanted to correct some of the points that is made in the video and kind of draw attention to the misinformation and just some of the misunderstanding in some of the points that he's made in the video. Other than like his opinions, which we don't really argue against opinions. But that'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more Star Wars content and DYAD Reacts. Hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. But as always, this is the end. On to the next one.
For light and for life.
We're all the Republic.
And may the Force be with you.